Conquistadors, k̒ŋ́kɪstə́tdɔːrz, is a term used to refer to the soldiers and explorers of the Spanish Empire or the Portuguese Empire in a general sense. During the Age of Discovery, conquistadors sailed beyond Europe to the Americas, Oceania, Africa and Asia, conquering territory and opening trade routes. They colonized much of the world for Spain and Portugal in the 16th, 17th and 18th centuries. Conquest. Portugal established a route to China in the early 16th century, sending ships via the southern coast of Africa and founding numerous coastal enclaves along the route. Following the discovery of the New World in 1492 by Christopher Columbus and the first circumnavigation of the world by Juan Sebastián Elcano and Ferdinand Magellan in 1521, expeditions led by conquistadors in the 16th century established trading routes linking Europe with all these areas. Human infections gained worldwide transmission vectors for the first time, from Africa and Eurasia to the Americas and vice versa. The spread of Old World diseases, including smallpox, flu and typhus, decimated the inhabitants of the New World. In the 16th century, perhaps 240,000 Europeans entered American ports. By the late 16th century, silver imports from America provided 1/5 of Spain's total budget. Background: the conquistadors were professional warriors, using European tactics, firearms, and cavalry. Their units would often specialize in forms of combat that required long periods of training that were too costly for informal groups. Their armies were mostly composed of Iberian and other European soldiers. Native Allied troops were largely infantry equipped with armament and armor that varied geographically. Some groups consisted of young men without military experience, Catholic clergy which helped with administrative duties, and soldiers with military training. These native forces often included African slaves and Native Americans. They not only fought in the battlefield but served as interpreters, informants, servants, teachers, physicians, and scribes. India Catalina and Malintzar were Native American women slaves who worked for the Spaniards. Castilian law prohibited foreigners and non-Catholics from settling in the New World. However, not all conquistadors were Castilian. Many foreigners Hispanicized their names or converted to Catholicism to serve the Castilian crown. For example, Joannes Phocas was a Castilian of Greek origin who discovered the strait that bears his name between Vancouver Island and Washington State in 1592. German-born Nicolaus Federmann, Hispanicized as Nicolas de Federmann, was a conquistador in Venezuela and Colombia. The Venetian Sebastiano Cabito was Sebastian Cabito. Georg von Speyr Hispanized as George de la Respera. Eusebio Francesco Cini Hispanicized as Eusebio Quino. Wenceslaw's link was Wenceslao Link. Ferdinand Consag was Fernando Consag. Amerigo Vespucci was Americo Vespuccio, and the Portuguese Alejo Garcia was known as Alejo Garcia in the Castilian army. The origin of many people in mixed expeditions was not always distinguished. Various occupations, such as sailors, fishermen, soldiers and nobles employed different languages, so that crew and settlers of Iberian empires recorded as Galicians from Spain were actually using Portuguese, Basque, Catalan, Italian and Languedoc languages, which were wrongly identified. Castilian law banned Spanish women from traveling to America unless they were married and accompanied by a husband. Women who traveled thus include Maria de Escobar, Maria Estrada, Marina Vélez de Ortega, Marina de la Caballeria, Francisca de Valenzuela, Catalina de Salazar. Some conquistadors married Native American women or had illegitimate children. European young men enlisted in the army because it was one way out of poverty. Catholic priests instructed the soldiers in mathematics, writing, theology, Latin, Greek, and history, and wrote letters and official documents for them. King's army officers taught military arts. An uneducated young recruit could become a military leader, elected by their fellow professional soldiers, perhaps based on merit. Others were born into hidalgo families, and as such they were members of the Spanish nobility with some studies but without economic resources. Even some rich nobility families' members become soldiers or missionaries, but mostly without to be the heir firstborn. The two most famous conquistadors were Hernán Cortés, who conquered the Aztec Empire, and Francisco Pizarro, who led the conquest of the Incan Empire. They were second cousins born in Extremadura, as were many of the Spanish conquerors. Catholic religious orders that participated and supported the exploration, evangelizing and pacifying, were mostly Dominicans, Carmelites, Franciscans and Jesuits. For example, Francis Xavier, Bartolomé de las Casas, Eusebio Kino, Juan de Palafox y Mendoza or Gaspar da Cruz. In 1536, Dominican friar Bartolomé de las Casas went to Oaxaca to participate in a series of discussions and debates among the bishops of the Dominican and Franciscan orders. The two orders had very different approaches to the conversion of the Indians. The Franciscans used a method of mass conversion, sometimes baptizing many thousands of Indians in a day. This method was championed by prominent Franciscans such as Toribio de Benavente. The conquistadors took many different roles, including religious leader, harem keeper, king or emperor, deserter and Native American warrior. Caramuru was a Portuguese settler in the Tupinambá Indians. Gonzalo Guerrero was a Mayan war leader of Fanacincan, lord of Chactamal. Geronimo de Aguilar, who had taken holy orders in his native Spain, was captured by Mayan lords too, and later was a soldier with Hernán Cortés. Francisco Pizarro had children with more than 40 women. The chroniclers Pedro César de Leon, Gonzalo Fernández de Oviedo, Diego Durán, Juan de Castellanos and Fray Pedro Simon wrote about the Americas. After Mexico fell, Hernán Cortés's enemies, Bishop Fonseca, Diego Velázquez de Cuellar, Diego Columbus and Francisco Garay were mentioned in the Cortés' fourth letter to the king, in which he describes himself as the victim of a conspiracy. The division of the booty produced bloody conflicts, such as the one between Pizarro and Almagro. After Peru fell to Spain, Francisco Pizarro dispatched to El Adelantado Diego de Almagro before they became enemies to the Inca Empire's northern city of Quito to claim it. Their fellow conquistador Sebastián de Belalcázar, who had gone forth without Pizarro's approval, had already reached Quito. The arrival of Pedro de Alvarado from Mexico in search of Inca gold further complicated the situation for Almagro and Belalcázar. Alvarado left South America in exchange for monetary compensation from Pizarro. Almagro was executed in 1538, under Hernando Pizarro's orders. In 1541, Lima, supporters of Diego Almagro II assassinated Francisco Pizarro. In 1546, Belalcázar ordered the execution of George Robledo, who governed a neighboring province in yet another land-related vendetta. Belalcázar was tried in absentia, convicted and condemned for killing Robledo and other offences pertaining to his involvement in the wars between armies of conquistadors. Pedro de Ursua was killed by his subordinate Lope de Aguirre, who crowned himself king while looking for El Dorado. In 1544, Lope de Aguirre and Melchor Verdugo were at the side of Peru's first viceroy Blasco Núñez Vela, who had arrived from Spain with orders to implement the new laws and suppress the encomiendas. Gonzalo Pizarro, another brother of Francisco Pizarro, rose in revolt, killed Viceroy Blasco Núñez Vela and most of his Spanish army in the battle in 1546, and Gonzalo attempted to have himself crowned king. The emperor commissioned Bishop Pedro de la Gasca to restore the peace, naming him president of the Audiencia and providing him with unlimited authority to punish and pardon the rebels. Gasca repealed the new laws, the issue around which the rebellion had been organized. Gasca convinced Pedro de Valdivia, explorer of Chile, Alonso de Alvarado, another searcher for El Dorado, and others that if he were unsuccessful, a royal fleet of 40 ships and 15,000 men was preparing to sail from Seville in June. History. Early Portuguese period. Infante Dom Henry, the navigator of Portugal, son of King João I, became the main sponsor of exploration travels. In 1415, Portugal conquered Ceuta, its first overseas colony. Throughout the 15th century, Portuguese explorers sailed the coast of Africa, establishing trading posts for tradable commodities such as firearms, spices, silver, gold, and slaves, in a worldwide route to Japan, crossing Africa, India, China and Korea. In 1434 the first consignment of slaves was brought to Lisbon. Slave trading was the most profitable branch of Portuguese commerce until India was reached. He later tried to incorporate by marriage the Kingdom of Portugal. Ferdinand notably supported Columbus's voyage that launched the conquistadors into action. Mediterranean background. In 1492, the combined populations of Spain and Portugal did not exceed 10 million people. The Spanish king's possessions extended around the Mediterranean to southern Italy. But Barbary pirates conducted an escalating war between Christian Habsburg Spain and the Ottoman Empire for control of the Mediterranean. It is estimated that between 1 million and 1.25 million Europeans were captured by Barbary pirates and sold as slaves in North Africa and the Ottoman Empire between the 16th and 19th centuries. They attacked the coastal villages and towns of Portugal, Spain, southern Italy, the Kingdom of Sicily, the Kingdom of Naples, and Mediterranean islands. Long stretches of the Italian, Portuguese and Spanish coasts were almost completely abandoned by their inhabitants and the island of Formentera became uninhabited. The Spanish Peninsula Muslims were suspected of connivance with northern African Muslim pirates. Cardinal Francisco Jiménez de Cisneros was instrumental in a massive campaign to convert Muslims to Christianity. From 1502, Ferdinand and later Philip II forced all Muslims in Castile and Aragon to convert or be expelled. The nominally converted Christian Moriscos were later expelled from Spain between 1609 and 1614. Treaties. The 1492 discovery of the West Indies by Christopher Columbus rendered desirable a delimitation of the Spanish and Portuguese spheres of exploration. Thus dividing the world into one exploration and colonizing areas seemed appropriate. This was accomplished by the Treaty of Tordesillas, which modified the delimitation authorized by Pope Alexander VI in two bulls issued on 4 May. 1493. The treaty gave to Portugal all lands which might be discovered east of a meridian drawn from the Arctic Pole to the Antarctic, at a distance of 370 leagues west of Cape Verde. Spain received the lands west of this line. The known means of measuring longitude were so inexact that the line of demarcation could not in practice be determined, subjecting the treaty to diverse interpretations. Both the Portuguese claim to Brazil and the Spanish claim to the Moluccas depended on the treaty. It was particularly valuable to the Portuguese as a recognition of their newfound, particularly when, in 1497 to 1499, Vasco da Gama completed the voyage to India. Later, when Spain established a route to the Indies from the west, Portugal arranged a second treaty, the Treaty of Zaragoza.